Lately, as I've been driving my Jeep around, I have noticed there's a lot of driveline vibrations occurring around 40 to 45 miles per hour. So what I did is start eliminating different aspects of the Jeep to try to pinpoint exactly where this is coming from. Well, I believe I found the source of the issue, and today's video is addressing that and how I solved the driveline vibrations on my 99 diesel swapped XJ. Let's dive into this video. Before I get into the shop and tear apart my transfer case, I just wanted to give you a little bit of a background of what I am experiencing right now. So what's happening with my Jeep is around 40 to 45 miles an hour, I'm getting a ton of vibrations in the driveline. I definitely can feel it favoring the backside of the Jeep, so naturally a lot of folks are going to say, okay, you need to put a slip yoke eliminator kit in your Jeep. And my Jeep is lifted 6.5 inches. It's a long arm lift kit from Iron Rock Off-Road. And I do actually already have a hack and tap style slip yoke eliminator kit. Now, with that being said, there's a reason why I purchased this G2 axle and gear slip yoke eliminator kit, and I have it sitting here on the table. And the reason why is I want to beef up what I already have. Now, the slip yoke eliminator kit that I put on, the bolt keeps backing out of the center, and there's just slop on the shaft, and it's just not as legit as I would like to see. The other thing that I ordered while I was at it was a new yoke for the Dana 44. And I believe that actually the yoke on my Dana 44 is what's causing all of the vibrations. And bear with me, I'll explain it. So on that yoke, where the U-joint slips in like that, I have about 3/16 of an inch of slop side to side in this U-joint. So effectively I can take the entire drive shaft and wiggle it side to side about 3/16 of an inch. Now I replaced the straps, just thinking that maybe the straps were worn out, trying to eliminate that. I replaced the U-joint and that did not solve it. So I believe that over time, over many years of use, the U-joint was able to walk side by side. Maybe at one point with a previous owner, this Dana 44, the straps came loose or something and the drive shaft really wore out the yoke. But either way, I got this yoke here and a new Spicer U-joint, and obviously that fits extremely tight just on its own. So I actually believe that this is going to solve my vibration issue. This slip yoke eliminator kit is just going to be really nice for me to have because now it's a little bit beefier than the hack and tap style slip yoke eliminator. As another awesome bonus, I do have an extra NP231 transfer case laying around at home. So I'm going to pack up now, go home and get that, and then we're going to tear into this thing right away and rip apart that 231, put this slip yoke eliminator kit in, put this yoke on the Dana 44, and then if my schedule permits right away, I'm gonna slap that right in the Jeep and give you guys some feedback. So guys, that was definitely a longer intro than I was expecting, but that's why I put the table of contents in the bottom. If you don't really care about the backstory, just click ahead and you'll get to the pertinent information that you're looking for. But guys, let's tear into this NP231 transfer case, get this slip yoke eliminator installed, the new yoke on the Dana 44, and then I'm gonna report back to you and let you know if it solved my driveline vibrations. Let's get into this video. So I was gonna run right in and kind of just do a voiceover of this section, but I realized that this camera was not recording when I started and I had already gotten started. So I'm gonna take a pause for a second. We'll get right into a little bit more of a fast-paced video. But the first thing that you had to do was actually take a chisel and hit this little collar off the front. You just give it a good smack right here. Right there. And what's gonna happen is it's gonna come right off. You just hit it with a chisel, it'll drive it right off the shaft. And then right underneath there is a little washer. It's just a little, I don't know, steel washer. And then you have a snap ring that you've got to get off. So after prying off that snap ring, I just used the same chisel, drove the seal out of the housing. Now there's one more snap ring in here. So from this point, we're gonna kick it right back into the video and keep this moving along. At this point, I was really able to step up the speed and gain some momentum on the teardown of the transfer case. I removed the Speedo gear assembly, then grabbed my 1/2-inch drive impact and 1 1/8-inch socket and removed the yoke from the front output shaft. Then I moved on to the tail housing, where I used a 10mm 6-point socket and my 3/8 impact to remove all of the bolts. I also forgot about a snap ring on the output shaft on the rear of the transfer case, so I took a second to remove that as well. At this point, you can begin prying the tail shaft housing off of the body of the transfer case. Just remember there are only 2 locations that are designated as pry points. If you stick the pry bar in the wrong location, you could actually mar the mating surface, effectively make it harder to seal your transfer case, and you may see leaks. I found that a little rubber mallet was easy to help dislodge the tail shaft housing, and I simply slid it off the shaft. You can simply set this off to the side, as you will no longer need this for reassembly. At this point, the oil pump is exposed, but what I did before removing that is simply remove all of the excess RTV that was on the transfer case, and I was careful to not let any drop inside. Then you can simply slide the oil pump housing off of the shaft. Just be very careful not to mar up the pickup tube or the O-ring for the pickup tube. I finished removing the rest of the RTV residue before moving on to the 10mm 12-point sockets on the center case of the transfer case. Just keep in mind there are a couple bolts that are larger. I believe they are a 15mm 6-point socket. I like to use baggies to keep all of my nuts, bolts, snap rings, and components safe and secure and organized. I highly, highly, highly recommend you do the same and then mark your baggies. At this point, you can use the designated pry points on the center case to separate the halves of the transfer case. This should not take much force. Just take your time and wiggle it back and forth until you are able to effectively remove the center case. Inside, you're going to find a magnet, and you're going to find a filter and your pickup tube, and this is what it's going to look like. Be careful not to misplace the pickup tube or the magnet that sits on the other half of the transfer case. Those are important, and you're going to need them for reassembly. After cleaning up my entire work area, I simply lifted the entire shaft and chain assembly out and set it down on my workspace. Okay, at this point, I just pulled the shaft out. I took the shaft off of the chain, and I got the other shaft just sitting right here, so you can kind of see the 2 shafts together, hopefully. And now one of the tricks that I saw online to do for this, and I want to show you guys, is there's a big snap ring right in here on the old shaft. I'm going to pop that snap ring off and then set the shaft like that. And that should allow all the gear assemblies to just drop straight down. And then I'm going to pick up this shaft, slide it in, and put the snap ring in place for that one. And theoretically, that should do what I need it to do. It'll keep all the gears and everything together, and I shouldn't have to fight it at all. I didn't mess with anything with the shift fork or anything like that. Everything is in place, and I didn't touch anything because I didn't want to move anything or mess anything up. One other thing that I wanted to add is, although I did drain this transfer case, there's obviously residual fluid, so just be careful when you're taking this thing apart because you could get trans fluid all over you. So yeah, let's keep it rolling. We're gonna get this thing apart and then keep moving forward. One thing I forgot to mention when I was doing my talking section there is depending on the year of your transfer case, there are actually roller bearings inside this gear set that you will have to press out. Mine is a late model NP231 transfer case, so I did not have to deal with that. Check your instructions, and you can also look online on other videos where they clearly show you how to do that to your transfer case if need be. So now at this point, I have the gears on this main shaft all assembled. That snap ring or lock ring, technically I guess you'd call it a lock ring, was a pain in the butt. Before you start this job, definitely get some lock ring pliers that have some flat edges and they're really grippy. These are gonna do a lot better for you than trying to use snap ring pliers to do this job. That was terrible. So now inside of the case, in here, I'm not gonna flip it around because I don't wanna make a mess or anything. I was just checking the plastic guides around here on the shift fork and just looking over everything. The chain itself, to be honest, I'm not sure the best way to tell if it's stretched or not. Doesn't look like it was hitting the case at all from what I can tell. But yeah, I'm just gonna install it the way I took it out, and we're gonna keep moving along. Should be pretty straightforward from this point. With the gears installed on the new shaft, now I slid it into the chain and dropped both of these shafts into the center housing. You shouldn't have to fight this. It should drop in fairly easily. Definitely take your time and don't try to force anything. Next, you can begin prepping the case halves, just wiping off any old RTV or gunk that's built up, making sure you are ready for the new RTV so you get a good seal on your transfer case. I also took a second to pre-lube any of the critical bearing or mating components. You don't have to go crazy, but any of the components that have a bearing surface or the chain or any of the shafts, it doesn't hurt to put a light layer of ATF on them so that when you first fire this thing up in drive after the rebuild, you don't have critical components that are dry without lube. Then I simply took my black RTV and smeared a thin layer around the one side of the case half. At this point, I simply lowered the other case half on. Again, you don't have to force it, just gently tapped it into position and then installed the bolts hand tight and then touched them up with my impact driver. The torque spec for these bolts is around 25 foot-pounds, so definitely don't go too crazy. You don't have to put an immense amount of torque on these bolts. If you want a little bit of an extra safety measure, you can apply some blue Loctite to the threads to keep these bolts from backing out. The next part is the oil pump assembly. Sliding that on. And I'm gonna try to show you guys, but I don't know how well I'm gonna be able to do it. But the way the oil pump assembly is gonna work here, so we're gonna slide it on, get it around the feed tube here. I'm going to hold up with a pick. Right, there we go. So you probably did not see that, and it's very difficult to show. However, you put the oil pump assembly on, and you kind of got to work that feed tube and just wiggle it around. I used a pick. You could probably use a small screwdriver. you kind of got to pull the shaft towards you like I just did, give you as much clearance as possible, and then kind of rotate the tube and pop it into its little inlet. Again, that's very difficult to show you guys because it's impossible to even see. So hopefully that explains it enough and that makes sense to you. So now we just got to move on to the snap rings for the Speedo gear. We'll install them. I should say lock rings. It's technically not snap rings. And just take the extra time and make sure that you are 100% certain that they are in that groove. All right. Now that's all in place. So the last thing that the instructions say to check out is to make sure that this little shift guide, this post that's sticking out of the back of the case, is 1 inch or less protruding out of the back of the case. So I can tell you that this one is less than 1 inch just by looking at it like this, but I am going to grab my tape measure and just double check to make 100% sure. If that does stick out further than 1 inch in the case, you're supposed to chop it off at 1 inch and then go from there, clean up the edges and all that good stuff. But I already cleaned up the mating surface here for the housing, so now the last step is to just bolt it on. At this point, I grabbed my tape measure and I just verified that the shift fork rod was not protruding more than 1 inch. If it is on your transfer case, you have to cut it off. I applied some RTV to the tail housing and with a couple light taps, snapped it into position. Then you simply grab the 10mm 6-point bolts and tighten them to 20 foot-pounds. Again, just like the center housing, you do not need to over torque these bolts. You do not need a ton of torque to create a good solid seal. At this point, I grabbed the yoke and I applied some RTV on the inside of the splines. This is going to help seal up the yoke on the shaft so you don't have any leaking ATF through this part of the transfer case. It also helps to apply some lube to the outside of the yoke so that you do not have a dry surface on the new inside seal. Then I also applied some RTV to the nut just for some added protection and some extra sealing. I did the same thing to the other yoke. Simply apply some ATF to the outside mating surface where the seal is going to ride, and then I applied some RTV on the inside splines of this yoke as well. At this point, I grabbed my 1/2 inch drive and my 1 1/8 inch socket, and I impacted them until the impact stopped turning. There was some conflicting information that I found in my manuals. My manual stated 90 to 130 foot-pounds on each of the nuts on the yokes, but my instructions for the slip yoke eliminator kit said 150 foot-pounds. So I would say follow the instructions that are included with your slip yoke eliminator kit. As you guys saw from that video, the slip yoke eliminator installation was not super complicated. I'll admit that that was my first time doing a legitimate slip yoke eliminator kit on my Jeep. I've always run the hack and tap style slip yoke eliminators, and if you're on a super tight budget, they do work and they do allow you to run a front drive shaft on the rear of your XJ. It's gonna help you out a little bit, but I just had so many issues with the tapped screw in the center coming out, and then there was a lot of slop on the shaft. It just didn't fit well. And then it was still the stock shaft on the rear, and it was a concern of mine with the extra torque and the 35-inch tires coupled with that diesel engine. So what I will say about this is the slip yoke eliminator kit definitely helped my Jeep, but the issues that I was experiencing were a compounding issue, and that's typically how this works with any vehicle. A lot of you have had death wobble in your Jeeps, and you know that it's not usually just one thing that's causing the death wobble. It's normally a multitude of different things all combined together causing the issues. The same thing can be said for my Jeep and the vibrations that I was feeling. Slip yoke eliminator definitely beefed up the transfer case. I have a lot more faith in that setup now, and the new yoke for the Dana 44 on the pinion is a huge deal. Now that the U-joint is tight, there's no slop, the driveline is rolling extremely smooth. But I made a horrible miscalculation when I purchased the slip yoke eliminator kit. I assumed that I could use my rear drive shaft, and that could not be further from the truth. It ended up being way too short, so I was forced to purchase an aftermarket drive shaft for my Jeep, and I am extremely, extremely happy that I did. So I ended up buying a Tom Woods drive shaft for the rear, one of their heavy duty units, custom, measured it up, I put the order in, paid for it, and it shipped only in a couple days, and I had it in my hand. So very quick turnaround, very high quality product, and that rear end of my Jeep now drives like glass. I just got back from a business trip that was about a 600-mile round trip, and the Jeep did amazing. I am so happy that I purchased that drive shaft. So much so that I actually reached out to Tom Woods and I asked them if they would be kind enough to send me a front drive shaft to be able to talk about it on the video here, do some product photography, and install it on the Jeep so I had a matching set of drive shafts. And they did agree to that. There's no money exchanged or anything, but I was that happy with the rear drive shaft that I had to have one for the front. And I can tell you guys, with both drive shafts replaced and beefed up, this Jeep drives like my Yukon. It seriously rolls down the road so smooth. I'm so happy with it now at this point. Plus now I have a beefier drive line to handle that extra diesel torque and the bigger tires that I have. And I pulled the front drive shaft off just to show you guys what I'm working with here. And like I said, I'm gonna put a link in the description so you can see exactly which drive shaft I purchased. I definitely recommend, if you're doing a slip yoke eliminator kit, to consider purchasing a beefed up custom drive shaft. You're gonna have to do it at least for the rear. You might as well do it for the front as well. There's a bunch of different companies out there that make reputable, good, high quality drive shafts. Tom Woods is one of them. There's lots of others out there. I don't get paid to say nice things about them. They're just good people and they helped me out with this build. So I appreciate them for doing that. It means a lot to me, and it makes these kind of videos possible when companies are willing to work with me, because I do have a very limited budget and I can't just go out and buy everything, but I do want to get gear on the Jeep so I can talk to you guys about it and showcase high quality products and good companies. So guys, the Jeep is rolling smooth. The transfer case was installed like a breeze. Not a complicated job. A couple things you gotta watch out for. If you have any questions, leave them down in the comment section below. If this video helped you, or you think that it's gonna help somebody else, send it to somebody. Just copy that link, send it to a buddy who's in the middle of horrible driveline vibes and who needs to just buckle down and do a slip yoke eliminator kit. Hopefully this video helps him or you out. Definitely consider subscribing to my channel, and while you do that, hit the bell icon to be notified when I post videos. If you like Jeeps, guns, traveling, and all that stuff, I do plan to put out more and more content of that flavor soon. So I appreciate you guys for sticking around and checking out my videos. Definitely swing over to the Jeep Instagram page, that is Turbo Diesel XJ on Instagram. Hit that follow button and check out the content over there. Guys, until next time, stay well, stay safe. I will see you in the next video.